Something I kind of noticed with some, and I want to be careful how I say this because I don't want to be judgmental of people, and I put myself in a lot of these same categories. But is I was reading up on the whole kind of helicopter parenting, bulldozer parenting names or whatever, how they've been in the past, and it was always something kind of fascinating. My parents weren't like that necessarily, but there's some members of my family who are, and to them it's like this fascinating dynamic because certain person in my family, to her, if there's an obstacle in my way, the only possible conclusion in her head is to just jump in and take the full bullet for me, no matter what. And I tell her, I'm like, that's not right. I need to fall myself to learn how to deal with it, how to get back up. There's just so many things, and this is now as a 32-year-old saying this to her, and when it happens with a younger kid and a parent just kind of takes control of everything in their life, I feel like it is setting them up for failure later on. And then I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit more. I feel like that leads to the type of person that would be more susceptible to addiction.
That's interesting. Why would that be the case, do you think?
So let's say somebody, I don't know much about the genetics of addiction. There's a lot of new science coming out that there's a lot of genetic components, but then they also say that can depend on, you could have the genes, but then kind of your environment and actions could dictate if you act on them, so to speak.
Gotcha.
So I know a lot of people, and I've seen a lot of people who they go, pretty much their life up to the age of 18 with, mommy or daddy or mom or dad or whoever kind of just clearing the way. Any and all obstacles are just taken out of the way, and for lack of a better term, the kid learns no accountability. It's, if I fail in school, it used to be, why'd you fail? Did you study? And now, if you genuinely failed because you put the time in, but there's a learning disorder or something more going on, I'm totally understandable. But I'm seeing more and more cases where that isn't going on, and little Junior failed because he stayed up, played Fortnite all night, but instead of mom and dad saying, like my parents would have done, why'd you fail? You need to study more. School is important. It's become, let me call the teacher in the school, ream them out for my son or daughter getting this bad grade, and then that teaches the kid, okay, mom and dad will jump in and fix everything. Fast forward, they get to college, and they have a professor who says, this paper sucks. You put no effort in. Redo it and get it back to me in 2 days, or else you're going to get a failing grade. And they just crumble because no one's ever told them the truth in life, or they meet somebody who's got a differing opinion on a hot button issue, and they've never been exposed to adversity because mom and dad jumped in. So that's when drugs and alcohol become this outlet of, I can't deal with X, Y, or Z. I'm at college, I'm at wherever this is available. Let me drown my emotions out because I've never learned how to deal with even the slightest adversity.
Wow, that does make sense. I will say that world, even though I've heard of it, it's so foreign to me that because I love learning about motivation and pathology and psychology, and what would motivate a parent to do that for their child.
Sorry.
Because it sounds exhausting.
Yeah, I'm sure it is exhausting, but it's funny you bring that up. So I'm going to try to say this without bringing up too many personal details. A friend of mine was with me at a family member's house. I'll leave it at that. And we had kind of this topic. This family member is the same one I mentioned a little while ago, who could be very enabling, controlling, smothering, whatever. And when we talked about it, specifically what he was saying afterwards was, you don't get it. She doesn't understand any other way. To her, it's just love. That's how you do it. That's how you solve it. That's how you... And I'm probably saying that wrong or not explaining it right, but the way he said it was like, it made a lot of sense of... In their mind, not all, but I guess some, they see that as love. Like, let me clear the golden path for them in life, so they don't have to go through tough things like I did, or they don't have to deal with, being that last day when the bills come and you don't have enough money. Maybe they don't have to deal with it. I'll clear the obstacles out for them. But it actually hurts way more than it helps.
Yeah. I wonder if, and this is something I would have to take the time to research, but I wonder how much of our current generation stems back to like the parents who came back from World War II, because it seems like it was a trend to give their children everything. Yeah. And so like that generation which parented us there's like a weird mix, especially as the opioid epidemic became a problem and divorce rate, or the amount of broken homes, I don't like saying broken homes, but for lack of a better term, rose in the 90s. We no longer had neighborhoods the same way. Children were left home a lot. And so parents who, I wonder, I'm not quite sure what generation it would be, but if to avoid all the pain that they went through, maybe they didn't have the best time with their parent who had come back from war. Especially, I'm thinking after Vietnam too. Yeah. That was a rough war. They wanted to make sure their kids never had to go through something like, for example, being drafted at 18 to go to a war that you don't even know what it's for.
Exactly.
But that would be my guess without doing any research. And so that is a generational developmental trauma that's being passed on, which is now feeding directly into all the problems with addiction.
Yep, exactly. And
God.
That was, you got a ton out there. Yeah. You hit it dead on, and I think it's a progressive thing too, almost like because especially what I was reading earlier today, it was talking about how it went from kind of helicopter parenting, which is just kind of being above but watching everything, what the term is for. And that even translated more into the bulldozer, which is clear it out of the way. And I think maybe you could say that it was like slowly just kind of one morphed into the other, or like little progressions throughout the whole parenting. And I think you could probably even attribute that to, America or plenty of countries in the world with the rise of success in the last 40, 50 years. People are doing better, so they obviously don't want their kids, like you just said, to go through any struggles they had, whether it was World War II, Vietnam, or even an in-house struggle, maybe an abusive parent or something. So they look at it as, let me give my kid any and every step up in life. But I think there's a huge divide between giving my child an edge up by sitting down and studying with them for an hour every night versus paying for this, that, or the third, or donating to the school to make sure that when something goes wrong, I could call and use that as clout to get their bad grades dropped.
Yeah, that stuff always disgusts me when people do that. One thing that's interesting too is that I've noticed, boomers always like to some boomers like to complain that our generation is entitled, and again, generalizations, but there's like this one half of our generation that seems to have this, everything will just work out for me because they don't know anything else. And then there's this other half, which part of it seems to relate to their parents dealing with opioid addiction. Several people I know had parents who were gone, they were raised by someone else, or they were in the home with that parent. And so all they know is turbulence.
Yeah.
And the world is just a dark place. And that's it. So there's such a weird divide in our generation.
You know, it's got to be so hard. Like, I'm not blaming the parents or the kids in most cases. Like,
Yeah.
you know, even my father's an immigrant from, you know, he was born in Italy. And,
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they moved to America when he was 3. My grandmother was 16. Well, she had him at 16. So when they
Wow.
moved, she would have been 19. So she's 19 years old. She already had 2 kids. My father, the oldest, and my uncle was 1. A third would be on the way as soon as they got here. They moved here, you know, dirt poor. None of them spoke the language. But her and her husband, my grandfather, they wanted to give their kids better than they had growing up. And they're growing up during, you know, World War II, Italy, and all that. So, you know, not the best. So my father has always said, I want to do the same. I want you both to do better than me, talking about me and my brother, to do better than I had growing up. Not that your grandparents gave me the best they possibly could, but they also worked 60 hours a week. So it's like it'd be hard to tell a parent like that, like, you're doing it wrong by giving your kids or helping them out. But then that's where I think a fine line comes in of kind of what made me think of it as those students you said, of like, okay, I could help, you know, my children in X, Y, or Z while still teaching or giving them lessons. An example that always came up with me was like I remember kids in high school when they turn 16, you know, most people get their first car if they get their license. And a couple of my friends they got their license and a brand new shiny cars waiting in the driveway the day they got their license. Then there was a couple who got their license and nothing happened because they didn't have any money and they had to wait to get a car until they saved up $4,000 or $5,000. I was kind of in the middle. You know, my parents are always, you know, hey, what were you looking at? This car's okay, $4,000. All right, you work, you save up, you know, show us you have half and we'll meet you halfway and see what we can do to help you out. And I thought that was kind of a good mix. And so I guess my whole point being, with like kind of those kids you were talking about, if the parents and the kids maybe together, but obviously it would be on the parents at that age, at 18. I know I was a knucklehead, not thinking about anything, but to find that mix of, you know, okay, maybe those parents of the kids you're talking about could afford to just send the kids $500 a week for every week at college and not think twice about it. That doesn't mean it's right. That doesn't mean, you know, maybe, hey, I want you to get a job for at least 15 hours a week that give you time to do your studies too, but you're still learning to make your own money and money management.